This won't come as much of a surprise to many long-term expats here in Thailand, especially in the rural areas, because I think this does affect the rural areas more than it does the tourist areas, which I'm going to go into in a moment. But I've been hearing a lot of stories recently about neighbours that are in trouble in terms of debt. So there is a common misconception, I think, especially in the international community, because I see it in my comments all the time, that there's a laziness in rural Thailand. Oh, these people are just lazy, they sit around in hammocks all day. Actually, this is bullshit. These people are very, very busy. Some of them trying to do multiple things to maintain their lifestyle there. They are not only kind of cooking and caring for the children that are often left with them from the parents that are in Bangkok, and they've sent the kids to live with them. Remember, these are elderly women most of the time that really should be relaxing in their old age, in their retirement, but are actually left looking after multiple children, trying to get them to school, trying to get the uniforms on, trying to make ends meet, trying to pay the bills, trying to feed everybody, cook for everybody. This is not laziness, guys. Also, you have them farming the land, trying to make whatever possible money they can in a location where it really is impossible to make any money. There is nobody spending, so there's nobody earning, you know what I mean? And so they're busy at work with their children, and any debt that has accumulated, which we're going to talk about today, is not a product of laziness. It is a product of the situation in many cases. And what I was really surprised to find out was the actual levels of debt that people have amassed, some totaling up to 3 million baht of debt. Now, to the West, that might not seem like a lot of debt when people factor in student loans and things like that. But I can tell you the amount of time that it would take a local to make back 3 million baht. Bearing in mind that the minimum wage is around 10,000 baht in Thailand a month, you deduct from that any of your expenses, which would probably be most of it. You may be able to save 20% of that. You can do the calculation here, how long it would take you to pay back 3 million baht on minimum wage. Now that's assuming minimum wage, guys. A lot of people in rural Thailand, they don't get minimum wage. There is no minimum wage. And now how is that debt actually accumulated? Well, it's easy credit, so there's a lot of easy credit that is given, usually based on land. So one thing these locals do have is access to the land, and this is the reason why I think that it affects the rural communities more than it does the tourist communities. Because in the tourist communities, the Thais don't have the land to take the credit out on. Of course, they do have salaries and things like that, those that can do that. But in the end, the land becomes a high value asset that allows a higher credit to be taken out than, say, a minimum wage salary. And this credit is often taken out to buy pickup trucks on finance, motorbikes on finance, new appliances, and there is no visible collapse that you can see. It's just a constant pressure. There is also a lot of borrowing in between families, and what you find in rural Thailand is that the land is often bought and sold between each other. So when one family member needs money, maybe they'll sell the land to another family member and say, please let me buy it back in a few years or whenever I come into some money. And so the land is always changing hands like the stock market. Certainly, I can only speak within my family, but this is always happening. Because the problem is, obviously, a lot of this debt cannot be paid back because there is actually no income. It's the reason the debt was required in the first place. Now, I should mention here that it's not actually government debt that is the issue. Thailand has a total public debt of around 12 trillion baht. So the debt to GDP ratio is only 64 to 65% of GDP. And this is actually higher than the pre-COVID levels, which was around 40%. And it does seem high, but in terms of like global standards, it's not like a crisis. It's not a sovereign debt crisis. It's not actually that high. Now, what actually seems to be the issue is household debt, clocking in at 88% of the GDP, which means that added together, Thai households owe almost as much money as the entire country produces in a year. If you take into account total Thai household debt of 16 to 17 trillion, and the number of households is, say, 23 million, household debt would be 700,000 to 750,000 baht per household, which is a lot of money, and it's probably why you see so many nice cars driving around places like this in Khon Kaen. A lot of it's on credit. Now, that's not to say those people cannot pay that back. Credit is everywhere, it's in every country. But for me, I see the particular impact in the rural areas because it's because of those loans that people are then having to sell important assets like the land, which of course is the heritage for the children. The land is the future for the children, and in my opinion, there's no statistic behind this. In my opinion, it is a lot of the reason why Thailand is quite prosperous, because the children always have, in many cases, not in all cases of course, they always have somewhere to go back to, and they're owning the land and they're not paying council tax on their land and being taxed by the government heavily on their land. Their land is their base, it's their home where they eat and they can sleep. Also, you see in places like the UK and the USA a lot of large corporations buying up the land and then renting it out. Now, that may be happening in Bangkok, but in the rural areas it's not yet. I think it will though, because as debts rise, household debt rise, there's going to be a market for all of this land when people default, and I think it is going to get bought up by major interests in the future. But right now, I think that Thailand's ostensible prosperity is based on a combination of economic prosperity, tourism, but also the debt factor. Now, you might say, well, Ryan, actually, that's all of Southeast Asia is like that. But just to give you a comparison of household debt as a percentage of GDP, Thailand is 88%, Malaysia is around 70%, Singapore is just 45%, Vietnam is 35%, Indonesia 16%, and the Philippines is just 12%. And so it is widely cited by central banks, the IMF and the World Bank, that Thailand has the highest household debt in Southeast Asia by a long, long way. And unlike places like Singapore and Malaysia, in Malaysia, households owe much less, but they earn more on average. And in Singapore, households owe far less relative to income. Unlike them, you have a lot of middle class here in Thailand, so there's a lot of borrowing going on to improve quality of life. Some of it is to improve the look of the quality of life, of course. If people have the ability to have something like a nice new car and the credit is there, they think, why not? But I do have a few subscribers. Well, I have one subscriber that he lives near the location where they repossess all the cars. So where all the cars that have been, the new cars that have been repossessed, they all are stored at a facility before they go to auction. And he said he has never seen as many cars that have been repossessed there in the past few months as ever before. So it is interesting to note that even though the credit is being taken and the cars are being bought, and many of them end up defaulting on the payments, and then the cars are repossessed and auctioned. And then this actually is still not a solution for the household, because the loan that they already took against land, or in some cases it's their salary and whatnot, they still owe because they took a very low deposit, maybe a high interest rate, and they now still owe the money. I've got neighbor friends that are in similar situations where they bought something, they don't even have the asset anymore, and yet they still owe money, and it's left them in a predicament. So again, if you look at other financial crises around the world, it is symptomatic of easy access to credit being a wider problem, not on a government level, but on a Thai household level, clearly. As many subscribers know, there are many countries that carry high debt anyway because incomes are high, or that the debt is tied to very productive assets, companies and whatnot. Thailand's issue is not the size of the debt, it's the income behind it. So you have capped income with increasing debts. That seems to be the bigger issue here. And now, saying this, the banks are still stable, there's no mass defaults, there's no currency collapse, no 1997 warning signs or anything like that. But when the households are stretched, growth does slow, as we're seeing already in the economic data. And that's why economists call it a structural vulnerability. It's not a crisis yet, but in terms of my neighbours, the ones that are specifically affected, it is a crisis for them. It's an individual crisis, you know what I mean? And I was actually shocked when I heard it was 3 million from various business endeavours, from buying cars, buying motorbikes. It's added up. And just as a personal opinion here, I kind of touched on it. But why I think it's important for the long term of Thailand, like, and this debt problem is a problem, and how I see it affects specific people. For me, the one thing that we always try and teach our kids is to hold on to the land. I've actually added land since living in rural Thailand, and there's a lot, actually. There's a lot of rice field and whatnot. It may not be worth a lot now. I mean, it is actually worth a lot relatively, you know. It's still a decent chunk of money, you know. But in the future, will be worth more than just the money, I think. When I look at other countries and the way other countries' real estate has gone, that land is freedom, that land is survival, that land is a future for the kids and the grandkids. It is a way that you keep yourself out of perpetual, in a way, slavery, guys, because the minute you don't have the land and somewhere to live, you're a renter on a minimum wage, and most of that energy that you're going to expel to live is going to go on paying for a roof over your head, and then your expendable income is not a lot. You've got nowhere to go back to for your retirement and all of this. One thing I think that my wife's family have been very good at over the years is, even in an emergency, when Damo's grandmother had a heart attack, they could have sold the land and paid 1 million baht for the operation, but they didn't. Damo ended up finding it a different way. But her mother was for sure not going to sell the land even for an operation. That's the kind of life and death decisions that have to be made when it comes to like selling this land. And when you compound debt on there and you're kind of forced out, that's where you lose your personal sovereignty. I just see a lot of sacrifice. I knew nothing about this before I came to Thailand, by the way, as well. I never even thought about it. But I've seen the sacrifices that Damo's mother has made, that the family have made, and how that has benefited the children growing up at the moment on the farm, and how it benefits rural Thailand families. And I wouldn't want to see a thing like a flashy car or irresponsible investments like compromise the children's future. Certainly, you know, Yai, my family, Yai's never even driven a car. She looks at my spending. She's like, oh, you know, you spend too much, you know, even if it's small things. Like, I bought her a dad, he drinks this mushroom drink. It's like 1,500 baht a bottle. And I bought 2 for him the other day. Oh my God, how could you spend that much money on it? Don't spend that much money. She's like that. So because of her non-superficiality, she's been able to preserve the land for the children, which I think many would agree is more important. I think that Thailand might be a little bit behind some other countries, and if it goes the same direction of certain countries, there could be economic consequences in the future. I think the way I look at Thailand now, it looks like an economic boom. However, the economic data is showing slower growth, but ostensibly it looks like an economic boom. And I think that obviously looks can be deceiving. So that's my little rant on that today. I'm sure there's a lot of myths there as well. A lot of, certainly my subscribers will want to add. If you have any personal stories about this as well, always interested to read it in the comments. Take care, guys. Hope you're well, and hope you enjoyed today's walk around Khon Kaen, finishing here at the temple.